Welcome to Standing on Business with Eric Foss. I'm your host, Eric Foss. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Standing on Business with Eric Foss. I'm your host, Eric Foss. Tonight, we're going to go talking about a little something I know about. Nowadays, I don't know too much about it, but we're going to do a few comparisons. We're going to be talking about the drug game. And what I mean by that is how it's switched over nowadays from how it was back in the day. Okay, let's just get into this. All right. Little brief history. I got involved in narcotics, selling narcotics back in the early 90s. Okay. So, as you'll see, nowadays, there's so many synthetic drugs. You got the fentanyl. You got everything going on like that. So let's just start from the beginning. All right, let's touch on marijuana. Now, back in the day, the marijuana game, okay, it used to be you'd get that dirty brick weed. You know, you get however many pounds of that. You know, you might get 50 pounds, 100 pounds, something like that. And, you know, you might get it for $600 a piece. So say 60 grand. Put 100, 200 on each one, you know, sell it. So you figure you make 80 grand. So you make 20,000 profit. And it was just weed was weed. Now, back then, that was basically dirt weed. Your best weed back then was like called Kind Bud. All right. Now, what Kind Bud was it didn't have seeds, stuff like that, which nowadays, you don't see seeds anymore, obviously. You know, everything's so high tech with the marijuana, things like that. So nowadays, like the Kind Bud that we thought was exotic, that would be like Reggie, like regular weed nowadays. It would be garbage. People wouldn't be interested in it. The prices have went up so much. And then they legalized marijuana. Okay. So far with what they've done with the marijuana thing, I believe is a good thing. You know, I think that it's got so high tech that, I think it's helped a lot of people in many ways. Now, let's talk about what I was in. I've dibbled and dabbled around in, other drugs, stuff like that. But my main source was cocaine. Okay. Now, back in the 90s, all right, if you were running around, and anybody who's around my age, I'm close to 50 years old, will know I'm telling the truth. Back then, if you were the man, if you were getting a brick, what a brick is a kilo of cocaine. All right. You were making a lot of money back then off of that. The reason being is the business was cash and carry. It wasn't all this just handing stuff out, praying that people pay you, things like that. So it was cash and carry. So even a guy back then, if you're getting just one brick, you're making a decent amount of money, especially because everybody couldn't get it. It was hard to have a good plug. People just weren't throwing it in anybody's hands. You had to be a little bit thorough to be in the drug game. People would attest to that because you would get tried. Now, like I said, everything was cash and carry. So say you were going through a brick every 2 weeks. Breaking it down, selling 8 balls, whatever. Say you're selling 8 balls for $150, $200, whatever. Quarter ounces, $300. All the same. Ounces, $1,000. So you will figure, if you're averaging off of an ounce, $1,000 to $1,100, and you're paying 20, and it takes you a week and a half to get rid of that. You're somewhere $36,000, $37,000. So you got $17,000 profit, which is pretty good, which is pretty damn good. Especially now, remember, we're talking about the 90s. So, price inflation, stuff like that. $17,000 back in the 90s is about $40,000 now. I'm just estimating that. I'm not some expert on that. Now, the thing that happened now, when I went away in the 90s, when I came out, I got out in 2003. Now, I seen a shift when I got back into this, when I got back into selling drugs. I went and I was going to get some coke, And I think first time when I got back into it, I bought like a half a joint, which is a half a brick, half a kilo. And when I was questioning around, like where to get this from, what's this like, what's that like, back then in the 90s, Coke was either good or it was bad. Good Coke or bad Coke. I had a guy tell me, like, well, what do you want? What kind of Coke? I was like, what do you mean? I said, powder. They said, no. Do you want shooters, sniffers, or smokers? I was like, I don't understand. They're like, well, this Coke is good for this. This Coke is good for that. I was like, man, I'm confused because good Coke is just supposed to be good Coke. All right. Now, another thing that had changed was this. Back when I first started hustling, we got into messing around selling Ready Rock. What Ready Rock is what a lot of people call crack. Where I'm from, Baltimore, we called it Ready Rock. And that's just cooked up cocaine. Now, here's the deal. Back then, when I first started out, I don't care how good your cocaine was. It could have been the best in the world. But when you cook it up, I don't care. You're going to lose some. That's why you had the crack epidemic and the crack was so strong and all that kind of stuff, is because you're cooking all the cut off of it, and it was cocaine in its purest form. Now, as time, I went away, and as it came out, they came up with this thing, whipping. So what that was, and it doesn't make sense, and it won't make sense, people will now, they will take, and I guess it's still going on to this day. Like I said, I'm not involved anymore. Anything I talk about, I've already done prison time for, everything like that. I still got people who I talk to are in the streets and all, so I know some information about what's going on in the streets nowadays and stuff, but I'm not involved anymore. But I'm just talking about my experiences. So the person tells me, they're like, yeah, they could take 4.5 ounces and cook it up, and they'll get back 6 ounces. And it's good. It's the great. I said, whoa, this doesn't make sense. No, you just don't know how to cook. You don't know how to. No, something don't make sense, because what is the pot just growing cocaine? No. So basically, what that is that's whipped up with doing whatever. Now that extra 1.5 ounces or whatever, that's got to be cut. That's got to be some type of other stuff. So now what that did was that makes the crack or whatever, that is actually cocaine in its weakest form. If all you got to do is use common sense for that. Like I said, the pot didn't grow that. So now you had that to deal with also. So it was a little bit confusing. Also, that was around 2003. Now, things have even changed, and it was getting bad then. But then, as I seen, and, just from my observations and stuff like that, it just has gotten worse over time with what people are now. Back when I was hustling, it was isotol, baking soda, things like that. They had this stuff called Comeback that you'd put in it, and it, stuff like that for your cut. Now they're putting anything in it. It just seems like I've heard that they put fentanyl in cocaine, which doesn't make sense to me. Crystal meth, which I believe I've never seen in my life, but we'll get into that. I think that I'd seen it once. Bad. But anyway, so it's just the people putting all this cut and stuff like this. This is what's made the actual drug that people think they're getting. They made it the actual drug weaker of what you think you're getting, but there's something else in there that could have a whole different effect, and it's taking lives. Basically, with the way that it worked back then was the control of the cocaine trade was through like the Colombians, and then they go through Panama and all that kind of stuff and get it over here. So you had hubs. It was actually difficult to get in the country. So you had hubs where, down in Florida, Miami, Florida, Laredo, Texas, New York has always been a big hub. Cali, you know, you got your hubs. So that was back then, you know, so there was a few spots. All right, now let's fast forward to how things happen. So you get the cartels now, the Mexican cartels, they get control of the drug trade, of the cocaine trade. Now hubs are everywhere. Everywhere. So you got them in Chicago, huge. Virginia, I mean, it's everywhere. So what that's done nowadays is it seems as it's actually had a reverse effect. And what's happened is now the United States is so loaded with the narcotics, with the cocaine, that there's more drugs than there is cash. So now it's turned into basically deals with no money. So nowadays, instead of being the guy who would buy the brick, get paid cash when you made your deal or whatever, and when it was gone, you got all the cash, everything like that, now you have to deal in more bulk. From what I'm seeing, you have to deal in more bulk. So now you have to get 10 of them, 15, 20, whatever, you know, definitely more than one. So a person is able to get that. Now it's being able to give it out with no cash because there's so many hubs and there's so much competition. So now what you got is you got people who were never able to get an ounce. Now all of a sudden people just want to throw bricks at them. So when they get that, now you figure like this. You got your top guy, he gives it to you. You're the mid-level guy. We'll call you the mid-level guy. So now he gives you 10 joints. But everybody can get it everywhere. So now you're in competition with your prices. So what happens is you actually have the people bitching about prices and talking about this and that. They're not even putting up no cash. And you actually would have to listen to them. So now you take this. Now you're not profiting as much. So say you're profiting $3,000 off each one. And say you get 10 of them. It's only 30,000 profit. Now imagine like this. Now all it takes is one of them to get screwed up. Look where you're at. You're already starting in a hole. Let's just say you're paying 17, 18, you know, one of them. So now you're going to start that 17 in the hole. Plus, let's talk about your $2 or $3 grand. Let's just call it 20 grand. You're 20 grand in the hole. Now you got the other ones to work with. But you have to do the same thing. Now, it might not even be the person's fault that you're giving it to. Because now, as these people give it to you, now you got to give it to this guy. Now, so you give this guy a whole one. Now, all of a sudden, he's giving out to his people the ounces, eighth keys, stuff like that. Same situation. One of his people mess up. Now his profit's gone. Now he's dragging and dragging. Now, even the people that he's giving it to, because we're dealing on such a bigger scale, the people that he's giving it to, they have to give it to somebody. By the time it gets all the way down to where it has to go and all the way back up with the cash, what you're doing is, first off, you're doing something crazy. You're having to make you're taking double the risk because the drug deal is supposed to go down. Boom, boom, cash exchange, drugs exchange, it's over. Now you have to sit here, boom, pray that you get it back, then go collect the money. So you're making too many deals. So it doesn't even make sense. And when you're going through a chain like that, as it goes down, somebody's going to fuck something up. Something's going to happen. Something's not going to be on time. Something's just going to be wrong. All right? So you have them issues nowadays. Like I said, there's not a lot of cash. I have people that I know, somebody who I'm close to, I know wouldn't lie to me, anything like that. And they actually told me that they were, they were involved in stuff from back in the day. And then kind of like recently and stuff like that, we'll just say, and they even told me, they said, now when they would collect their money, back in the day, 100 grand wasn't it wasn't taking up much space. He said they collect their money, and most of the money, say they collect 100 grand, they say, man, 60 to 70% of it would be in $20 bills, stuff like that, small bills. And they said they noticed something. The bills were crisp from a bank machine. What's that telling you? That means that the crackhead, the user, is actually the only one with money. You understand how that's working? So it has to go all the way to that lowest level to actually see any type of cash. And hopefully by the time it gets all the way back up, then, you know, everything's straight, which it never is going to be. You know, it just causes a lot of problems. So it's basically United States of America has opened up the floodgates. And like, it's killed a lot of things, man. And it's actually killing people with the stuff that they're putting in it. Now, with that whole thing, as I'm looking around, I'm observing with the cocaine thing, you don't see many people now overdosing on the cocaine, stuff like that. You don't see many deaths arising out of it. There's not a lot of that going on. All right, because, you know, it's whatever they're whacking with and stuff like that. Now, I don't know about the fentanyl stuff. Like I said, it doesn't even make sense. Also, people know there's so much stuff, people know how to disguise things nowadays. See, when you would get a real brick, it would come wrapped up, you know, the black rubber, all that kind of stuff, and then packaging around it, and you open it. Obviously, everybody's gonna have some type of stamp. You know what I mean? Like it's just like crazy. But on the real ones, if you're actually at a high enough level that you're actually getting it, now it's all recompressed, remember, because it doesn't come in round form. But the real ones will come, and they'll have on the sides of them, you'll have 4 to 6 holes. People are like, holes? What do you mean? What the holes are for is because all this going on nowadays, even the Mexicans or whoever, I hate to say Mexican, you know, cartels, whoever's in control of it, they do that because of so much cutting agents and people playing with the stuff nowadays. That's for them. Every hand that it touches, they go in there, pull a little bit out. That's why them holes are in there. And then they test it, make sure nobody's messed with it on their high levels, you know, because there's a lot of money to be made cutting stuff. Also, with the floodgates being open like this, it makes it like Bitcoin. It's kind of a good analogy, Bitcoin, because like I knew of a guy, he had been out of the game for a while. So when he wound up getting back in it, he told me his people gave him something for what was a good price. It was like the prices were really high, like 36 was the going price, 36,000. Basically overnight, he got it for like 32, I believe he told me, or something like that. But he got a decent deal. Basically overnight or within a week, prices dropped all the way down to about 28. You understand what I'm saying? It's like the stock market, because that it was so much coming in and it's so easy to get in and there's hubs everywhere. So the prices went way down. Just like I said, I don't know much about crystal meth or anything like that, but I remember hearing from people who dealt in that, like back in the day, like in the 90s and early 2000s and stuff. That stuff was really expensive. Now it's dirt cheap. You know what I mean? It's like kind of worthless. And that's because of the cartels now setting up shop here, setting up the labs here and everything like that. Same thing with the cocaine. It's just too much access to it. It causes too much confusion. And like I said, there's more drugs than money. It's all about supply and demand, just like the housing market. Everything's supply and demand. So you have too much of this stuff. And like I said, you got people nitpicking and all. They don't got a dollar to their name, and they will argue prices with these people, like, because somebody else will give it to them. That's how easy it works. And what that leads to is a bunch of people own a bunch of people money. That leads to conflicts in the street, things like that. And like I said, the profit margins are gone. You take one loss, but you're going to take more than one loss working that way without cash and carry. It's never going to work. It just doesn't. And your profit's gone. You know, the only thing that people do, they actually rob Peter to pay Paul. They'll actually have one guy they could come to. They'll use his money. They'll do that, and everything like that. So that's basically what's going on with that game now. Now, another thing that I'll touch on here is heroin. Me personally, it's never been my game. That's never been my game. The only time I've ever sold that was when I was in prison. And they don't even sell that in prison anymore. That's all turned into Suboxone and K2. They don't sell weed really in prison. It's K2, that deuce, the spray, whatever, and Suboxone. That's so that game is out of the way in prison. Now, on the streets, I don't even believe it exists. People still call it dope, still call it heroin. I don't think that it is. I think that it's just fentanyl. That's other shit all in it. I've heard kids, like when I was in jail before, I heard them talking about, like, these are little corner hustlers and all, talking about different type of psychiatric medications and like different pills and stuff that they'll crush up, yeah, I'll put this in my dope. And I'm thinking, like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? And the thing that I notice is this: anybody out of my era, they will tell you this. You know what we had that you don't have anymore? Old dope fiends. You had men who've been shooting dope 20, 30, 40 years, and they'd still be alive. They're old. Now, they don't look good or nothing like that, but they were still alive. You don't see old dope fiends anymore because they don't live. They don't live. It's not dope. Back in the day with real heroin, I do know a man that was big into it. He's from the Pizza Connection, everything like that. He's doing life in prison, and he told me all about it. Like, back in them days, a kilo of heroin was $250,000 to $300,000 for 1 kilo. Nowadays, people talk about a kilo of heroin, 20 some grand, stuff like that. Now, listen, here's the deal, though. That kilo back in the day, they would take the bonita and quinine, whatever. I'm pretty sure that's what they cut it with back then. That was the cuts. There were certain cuts that you cut certain drugs with. It wasn't just throw everything together like a trash can. It just wasn't like that. So they would take the bonita and they'd take the quinine, and out of that kilo, they would probably make. They would say, yeah, this dope takes a 10, or this dope takes a 19, or what, And basically what that is like, out of that brick, you might put out the bonita and quinine on. Next thing you know, you got 10, 15 bricks, and then they would sell it, and that would still put people's dick in the dirt. Like, you'd see people with the dope fiend lean, nodding, standing up, nodding. Now, people did OD off of that, but not at the rates that's going on nowadays. So what's going on nowadays is with all the synthetic drugs and this fentanyl stuff. So what they're doing is now with the Chinese, first off, the Chinese had said a long time ago, they said about America. They said, yeah, we're at war with America, but this isn't a quick war. This is a 100-year war or something like that. So they're actually using drugs and our own idiocies to defeat us. You got to pay attention. So now what's going on is this fentanyl craze has came along. So that's the new heroin. Fentanyl is actually cheaper than heroin. So the profit margins are put so much up. And here's the problem. Drug dealers. I'm a former drug dealer. Active drug dealers. People who sold drugs. Guess what we're not? We're not scientists. We're not chemists. Okay? So, even if a person's intention, and even if they do it right 50 straight times, 100 straight times, 1,000 straight, it's only a numbers game. You don't have the accuracy of what you're putting in there to be this certain amount in each one or whatever. Just a little bit over can take somebody's life, and that's horrible. So now that's a double-edged sword also, because what's happening now is I've seen this by being in prison, I've seen young kids, they'll go out, they weren't nothing but drug addicts themselves. They weren't big drug dealers. They weren't, doing nothing crazy, nothing like that. They might go know what corner. They might be from, it's usually somebody who might be from like a Pennsylvania or something like that, or a country place, and they'll go down into a major city, like say a Baltimore City. because they know where to get dope at. So they'll collect people's money up there, go down, they make themselves a few dollars in their pocket, maybe themselves a little bit to get high off of. Now they take it back, they give it to these people. These people do it, and they die. So now what happens? The police trace everything that went down. Now the person who went, the other drug addict who just getting high with the person who went and copped it and gave it to him, now they get a prison sentence, a federal prison sentence with a mandatory minimum of 20 years, which in federal prison, a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years, you're going to do about 17, 18 years on that. So that's destroying lives in that way. One craze that actually hit while I was doing my time, and it just really got, I've heard about it, and it's still existing to this day, was the pills. Percocets, Oxycodone, whatever, the 30s, you know what I mean, the M-boxes, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so basically that craze caught on while I was locked up. I was away. Actually, my youngest brother passed away from Xanax and drinking. You know, actually real Xanax and drinking. So what happened with that was it just got so many doctors and they had them pill mills, stuff like that. Then people, you know, got cut off of that, everything. And now the government's controlling it to where as though people are only prescribed this much a month, whatever. So, like I said, supply and demand. There's not a lot of it. So people will have the cash for that because people get sick if they don't have it, things like that. So what crept into that? Fentanyl. People started getting these presses, breaking up, you know, whatever, putting fentanyl and making fake Xanax, making fake 30s, just making fake pills. And now they're selling them to people. Now, here's my take on that. You shouldn't be doing it, no matter what. You shouldn't be doing it. But if you are presenting a drug to a person and they know what they're getting and they know the risks and everything like that, I believe this, and they OD or something, man, I don't think a person should go to prison. I think that's on that person who decided to do that. But if you're presenting something as something like, if I present, hey, here's a Percocet, it's an Oxycodone or whatever, it's from the pharmacy, whatever, and I know that it's not, and I press that pill and I put fentanyl in it, and that person ODs, I did that. Like I killed that, but I would be guilty of killing that person, I believe. So it's turned into something crazy. Now, people don't pay attention to certain things. Like a person will say, oh yeah, well I can go buy 200 of them off this guy. Like they don't even prescribe that many of them. So, and as fast as they go, so you know it's already some fake stuff, you know, and especially through like the Xanax, stuff like that. Like I said, in prison, and when I was locked up from federal prison from 2003 to 2014, all right, it was heroin. Heroin was the main prison drug. You've seen some people, they were like, if there's a lot of West Coast people and stuff in the joint, like in the penitentiary, they'd get that meth stuff and the crystal meth stuff or whatever. But it was heroin, marijuana, okay, weed. Now, that doesn't even exist in prison. Like I said, now it's Suboxone or the K2, which is, I guess that when I was locked up when that first came out too, and they called it Spice or something like that. I've never seen that to this day. I don't know what the Spice stuff is. I've heard about it. But now in prison, it's just like, you know, it's a spray that they put on paper, they mail it in. It's gotten so bad that you can't even get your mail in federal prison. Like the federal prisons I was at, you can't even get your mail. What they do is, like, if somebody sends you mail, a letter and pictures, what they do is they take it to the the mail room and they Xerox copy it, and then they give it to you like that, so nothing's on it. So that's gotten crazy. I've seen people, I don't know what's in this stuff, but like some of that K2 stuff, they have episodes, they'll take a hit, and next thing you know, they go into like a zone, they'll slobber. I've seen people fall down, I've seen people fall out, I've seen a lot of things happen. Makes people paranoid because you don't know what you're getting. It's come to a craze that nowadays these kids, like, everything can be disguised, and they don't even understand what they're getting into. Like I told you, like I've experimented with drugs, and like I said, the one time I think that I seen crystal meth or had any affiliation with it was back in the day. They had e-pills, ecstasy. When I first seen ecstasy was when I was really young, and it would come in like half moons and stuff like that. There were like these rave clubs and things like that. It wasn't really big. Then in the later 90s, it picked up. So I've done them. I've done them before, and they were pretty clean, whatever. But now, what it switched to is even them pills. They're not what. That's not ecstasy. You know what I mean? I don't know what they're putting in them. But now it switched over to this stuff called Molly. So now that's my experience with the crystal meth. I had this years ago, probably 2016, something like that. I had got some of that, and I bought it. And when it was the second time I ever bought it. First time it was like brown and it was like powdery stuff like that. Now this time when I bought like an ounce of it. Got a good price, whatever. So it didn't look the same though. It was kind of like clear, you know what I mean, like clear rock. Now I did a tiny bit. I ate it or whatever. Man, I wound up flushing the rest of it. I sat there for about 3 days. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. My stomach hurt. It was crazy. I was puking. I believe that was probably crystal meth. But I still don't know to this day. You know what I mean? So with the disguising of the drugs and the plentifulness of it, it's just destroying lives. What's happening is it's just like now also, like I said, it's a two-edged sword because it's destroying people's lives from using the drugs. Then it's just destroying people's lives because they're sending people to prison for draconian prison sentences for this stuff. The weed thing, like I said, I the weed's legal pretty much, but at the end of the day, I don't think that was a bad thing. But everything else I do think is bad. Now, when you're getting down into like certain things, like I remember when I first came home, there was this kid. I knew these kids, and I seen them. They were getting high, and it looked like they were smoking crack. I was like, "What the fuck are y'all doing?" I was like, "You're smoking crack," you know what I mean? So I'm yelling at these kids. The one kid looks at me, he's like, "Dude, what's wrong with you? It's dabs." I was like, "What?" It was something called dabs, like what everybody's probably heard of. This was like 2014, so and that was just like, I guess, like how we used to have hash back in the day or whatever. I guess that's just when they pull out, you know what I mean, whatever from THC or whatever. So that's what that was. So everything's gotten a lot stronger in the marijuana case of it, but it's actually gotten for better, and it's been scientists have gotten into it. Like I said, these are actual chemists, scientists, actual people putting time into this, growing it, you know what I mean, being able to test it. But when you're dealing with these harder drugs, like I said, like with the heroin, there's no such thing as heroin. That's not heroin, that's fentanyl. And that's why there's no old dope fiends. That's why just one thing. I mean, even a person who gets one of them pills, they might take one, and they might be used to doing 3 or 4 30s at a time. And now they sit there and they usually, I guess they snorted, some of them say they just snort one. You might never hear from them again. They might be gone because of all the cutting agents that they're using. So it all comes down to greed. It all comes down to just basically total chaos with the borders being open. It's just so easy. I mean, the math doesn't make sense. You can't just have so much flooding of this and flooding of that, but it makes sense if you're China or a place like that, and now the cartels, they don't care. They're just greedy. They're trafficking everything. Everybody knows that, you know what I mean? And look, these people are in with our government too. It's our government also. There's been a lot of parents out there that lost children, a lot of children who've lost parents, because of this stuff. Nothing is controlled anymore. Nothing is controlled anymore. Like I said, you get the confusion with there's no cash on hand, so that could lead to violence when people, people think they got screwed over for money, but they don't understand that this guy who he gave it to might not have even screwed him over, but he didn't screw him. But once it gets all the way to the end and works its way back up, something gets screwed over, so the cash doesn't come up right. the profits out of it. So it's really destroyed America. It's just destroying America. I mean, I wouldn't say slowly but surely, but it's doing it quick. It's doing it really quick. You got laws in place that don't make sense. Like people talk about, oh, fentanyl, oh, they'll bust your head for it. No, they won't. No, they won't. Look at federal guidelines. Crack is still worse than fentanyl. It still is. 280 grams of crack will get you a 10 to life, and it takes 400 grams of fentanyl to get you a 10 to life. Just being, that you can look that up yourself, So they might make this like big thing over it. And like I said, crack would be cocaine in its weakest form because there's no such thing. I don't care who you are whipping and all. That's just putting cut on it and just disguising it well. You know what I mean? That's also taking money out of it. Because back in the day, when a person smoked that stuff, they couldn't go to sleep. They'd be up, boom, boom, boom. They'd keep wanting to get it. That's why the money came in like that. Now it's weaker. But like I said, that's a drug in its weakest form with a higher penalty than fentanyl. Figure that out. And don't believe the hype. Like I said, you can Google it yourself. Look at the federal drug quantity table for the federal sentence guideline. It'll be right there. 400 grams of fentanyl, 10 to life. 280 grams of crack, 10 to life. Now, I'm not saying either one of them are good, but listen, that fentanyl is a whole lot worse. And the worst one I think is still the meth. I'm not sure. Few other ones, like you got people now, they're just running around. They're just taking like different drugs, psychiatric drugs, this and that. They're just mixing it. It's just gotten horrible. And like I said, there's no good ending to it. There's no real money in it anymore where it was. Or let me say it like this. It's not easy money. Because like I said, your whole middle level is broke. Is broke. And you got these people who are now have so much access to it, who are bringing it in, they'll just give it to anybody. They'll give it to anybody. Like I said, you'll see a guy who never back in the day had an ounce, never could afford an ounce. All of a sudden they got a brick, 2 bricks, 3 bricks. That's because people are giving it to them, praying that they can get rid of it. They got this, It's just a whole bad situation. And you have so many people just being affected by it. Especially with like I said, the worst part of it is the fentanyl stuff. That's just, that's just taking people out left and right. Show me an old dope fiend. Show me one. There is none anymore. There is none anymore. So remember that, this is something that you don't want to get involved in. I just wanted to break that down for you guys tonight, so get up off of here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, none of this is glorifying. Like, obviously, I didn't glorify none of it because you can lose your life in so many ways. You can lose your life because you could die. You can go to prison. You know what I mean? And you can also hurt. You'll hurt people, and you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're getting at the end of the day. Like I said, remember, and I'll break it down for you real quick again. Remember, back in the day, cocaine, we had isotol, baking soda. We had certain things we cut it with. Heroin, bonita, and quinine. They had certain things they cut it with. Now, you don't know what the hell you're getting. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. All right, guys. Till next time, remember, always stand on business.